Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. It's time for me to open the hearing. I understood there'd be a fire test now.
Imminent.
Okay, we'll wait a few seconds then. In the meantime, if anybody's got a mobile phone switched on, if it'd be a good time now to switch it off or switch it to silent. Can everyone hear what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
There you go. It's normally on time.
We'll go around the room.
Okay.
There is a ceremony going on in the council chamber, so it may be good for later.
Okay. My name is Gemma Dring and I'm appointed by the Secretary of State to conduct this hearing today to determine the appeal by Mulhill Limited and Transform Housing and Support. This appeal results from the decision of Waverley Borough Council to refuse an outline planning application with all matter reserved except for access for a phased development to provide 14 residential dwellings, including 6 self-built, custom-built dwellings at Longdean House, Hedgehog Lane, Haslemere, GU 27 2PH. The hearing today will be a structured discussion which I will lead. The purpose is for you to put your views across and for me to be able to gather the information that I need to make a decision. Before we start, I just need to cover a few matters. In the first instance, I'd like to know who's present and their interest in the case. Can I start with the appellants, please? I have got a list here, so that might be useful.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Paul, Services Group. Yeah, dealing with matters related to last issue. And you have a hearing statement on it.
Charlie Banner, KC, cancelled for the kind of, please do call me Mr. Banner for other things.
Gary Stevens, Planning Director, Planning Consultant, acting on behalf of the appellant.
Alfred Lawson, the Director of Monk Hill Limited, the appellant, one of the appellants.
Ian Rhodes, FFT Management, acting for Monk Hill.
Tim Johnson, Conrad Pennington, Manchester Cooper, solicitors for the appellant.
Suzanne Edwards, I'm the Development Manager of Transform Housing and Support.
Natalie Murphy, I'm the Head of Housing and Support for Transform Housing and Support.
Paul Control from Architectural Services.
Could you spell what's sorry, could you spell your surname with
QUANTRILL.
who are you representing?
The appellant.
In what capacity?
Well, I'm an independent.
Peter Nicholson, Waverley Borough Council, East Ward, asked me to dismiss the appeal.
Okay, so if I start from the council, if I start from this end, so I've just got so I'll come back to you in a second.
Joanne Hollingdale. I'm Development Manager of TV and MRC representing the council.
Hello, Clive Smith, Surrey Hills. I nearly said AONB, National Landscape Planning Advisor.
John Hutchinson, a resident of Hedgehog Lane.
Guy Reynolds, I'm also a resident of Hedgehog Lane.
David Pope, I'm a resident of Courts Hill Road.
Hi, thank you. Peter Nicholson, Waverley Borough Council Councillor, Haslemere East.
going to be involved in the hearing or no? Okay. Is anyone representing the press today? I understand it's been live streamed from the request of other interested parties.
Yes, that's correct.
Is it being recorded or just live streamed?
As far as I'm aware, it's being live streamed over YouTube, so I assume there will be a facility to watch it back.
I've had a copy of the notification letters and the representations from interested parties at both application and appeal stage where they've been submitted. And I will take those into account in reaching my decision. I carried a visit around the surrounding area yesterday and I've got a good awareness of its surroundings. I know there was a request for the hearing to continue on site, but based on the amount of written evidence I've got and my understanding of the site surroundings yesterday, I don't think it would be useful to continue the hearing on site. What I would say though is you are quite within your rights to point out physical features or a particular view or anything you rely on your written evidence at that point. So it's my intention to close the hearing here. So anything you do want to say must be said before we leave the room. In terms of conditions, I've got a list of suggested conditions from the council and there's a suggested condition from the appellant. So we will go through those later on in the hearing. It's standard procedure and it doesn't indicate I've made my mind up in either direction. In terms of costs, I note the appellant has submitted a cost application. Thank you for the clarification on the draft terminology. There will be an opportunity to add to that verbally during the hearing at the designated time on the agenda. So do you have a power to initiate award of cost whether or not an application has been made by the council? If I were to do this, it would follow a written process with the relevant party after the appeal. In terms of the main issues, I produced an agenda that was circulated. So based on the written evidence, I've identified the main issues as the effect of the proposal on the landscape character, including the effect on the Surrey Hills National Landscape and Area of Great Landscape Value, whether the proposal would make adequate provision for affordable housing, and whether the proposed self-building custom housing would form affordable housing. Are there any comments on those main issues?
I think plainly there are the benefits of the planning glass. I'm assuming you have those in mind of the other matters to you at the end.
Yes.
And one of the issues which is really bullets to and really allied together is whether the scheme is or could be a subject to 106, 100% affordable housing, which is obviously very important. I understand there may be an availability issue with some of the transform people, so subject to your convenience, madam, it may make sense if that's dealt with potentially, but also guided by you.
What are time restrictions?
Yes, as soon as possible, but yeah, we just need to leave sort of lunchtime-ish if that's.
Okay, we can swap those around. We'll do the second two main issues first.
Thank you.
So I'll invite contributions from one side and then the other, and then from interested parties as well, so everybody's involved in the hearing process. If you want to make a point or feel I've moved on before you've finished what you're trying to say, please do let me know. There'll be no formal presentation of cases, no opening statements or cross-examination, and any questions to other parties should be directed through me. In terms of policies, has there been any policy changes that I need to be made aware of?
I ought to just mention about the new Surrey Hills National Landscape Management Plan.
Yes.
Because the decision was made on the old one.
Yes, I have had a copy of that through. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. In terms of the plans I've listed on the agenda, is everybody in agreement that they're the relevant plans?
Yes, I think the only one was regarding the tree protection plan, which I think has been
Yes.
correspondence prior to the hearing. around
Yes,
that,
I
so-
raised that. I don't appear to have the first version of that plan.
Okay,
So I only have the second one. Other parties agreed that it's the second plan that I should take into account, with it being based on the updated tree preservation orders. Is that?
That's fine.
Okay.
If we're moving beyond policies, can I make a couple of observations on the policy section?
Yes.
Firstly, we don't have a crystal ball, but there's some prospect if the consultation draft new NPPF is published before your decision, that could have a material impact on what is currently paragraph 11. It could change things potentially quite importantly. So just to flag, depending on timing, we might need to make representations to you on that.
Yes.
No point in speculating on what it would be. And secondly, Madam, just to flag, because there was some potential difference between the parties, our position is all the policy development plan policies listed in your list at the beginning are out of date by virtue of lack of a 5-year supply, because they're deemed out of date by paragraph 11 and footnote 8. And if that's right, which we say it is for the reasons you've got, claiming that has a reductive effect on the weight, because an out-of-date policy can't have as much weight as an up-to-date policy.
That you contend that those are the main
Those are the
policies in the
policies,
development
yes.
plan.
Yeah, they are the most important policies, and it's by virtue of that that they then get less weight.
I'm not expecting or inviting any additional evidence, but if you intend to submit any, please tell me now.
Yes, I've only come into this appeal fairly late, and therefore I was unable to meet the requisite date for submission of statements. You've got my advice to the council on the planning application. What I'd like to do is to speak to some notes that I've prepared, and I can give you and the other parties a copy of those notes, but you may rule against that.
Yeah, I wouldn't accept anything that could have been submitted earlier in the process at this stage, but you're quite welcome to verbally.
Yeah,
make
I just
comments.
wanted to save you having to write copious notes as I went through it, because
I appreciate that.
I do need to expand upon the advice I've previously given.
We do have to stick to the process, the
I
hearing
do
process.
understand.
Madam, just because if they're new points that could and should have been made earlier, they're not legitimate whether made orally or in writing. So just to flag that, we'll have to see what we'll get to. Madam, just to flag as well, Mr. Johnson has prepared not new evidence, but a explanatory note in relation to section 106, just to help you navigate through it. That's not evidence, but it's a sort of user's guide.
I appreciate that.
We'll have either give to you now, or when we get to the 106.
I think it might be useful to hear about that going into the two main issues. So I think that, given that it was submitted late and we've only just had a chance to have a read through of it, it would be useful to hear that before we go into the main issues. An explanation.
Would you like a copy of my speech that I'm going to talk about?
I'm unable to accept anything in writing at this stage, but as I say, I'm happy to hear verbally the comments.
Thank you.
Just to bring Mr. Johnson to the front, as the shuffle his stuff, just to make it easier.
We'll take a break mid-morning and for lunch and mid-afternoon. We'll aim to finish no later than 5 p.m. Hoping to do the site visit today. We'll see how things go today and what time we get to. Are there any questions at this stage about the procedural side of the hearing? Okay, we'll move on to the first main issue, and that will be about whether the proposal will make adequate provision for affordable housing. So if you'd like to just explain the updated unilateral undertaking.
Yes, it's not evidence, this is just an explanatory factual only of it, which just to help to read, you don't have to be Okay.
Yeah,
Can I
Yeah, you
get
can.
this in my first? It seems to be agreed now by the council that the custom and self-build is in principle capable of being affordable housing. At the committee stage, it was suggested if the two can't have custom and self-build as affordable, that would seem to be conceivable now. If that's right, and you might want to get clarification of that, then ultimately it becomes a question of what does the 106 need to do in order to achieve that? And what we're trying to do through the formulation of the 106 is to give you the tools you need to make it affordable housing in light of what you decide is necessary to do so. So we have our own view as to how much of discount is needed and various other aspects of it. If the council agree it can in principle be affordable housing, then obviously they need to explain how do you then achieve that in their view, and then we'll give you the choice. And the key thing that we're keen to get across from this part of the discussion is, provided we give you the choice to make it affordable housing either on our terms or whatever terms the council thinks are necessary to make it affordable housing, then provided we give you that mechanism, this is a 100% affordable housing scheme by hook or by crook. You will choose whether it is by hook or by crook, but it is, and that is pretty important in terms of then understanding the other issues. But it would be really helpful to get clarity from the council that they accept those points, so that you're in no doubt that we agree that one way or the other this can and will be affordable housing, and we can debate then the how.
okay, council wants to come back on that.
Yes, so the council accepts that the MTPF definition does allow for self-build, custom build housing to be affordable, but based on the proposed before us, council's position is that what is being proposed does not fall within the definition of affordable housing with regards to self-build and custom build plots.
Just come back on it, whether that's far as far as it goes, but there's based the question, what does the council expect to see for it to be affordable housing? Because it accepts in principle it can be, which it does, it must accept that there is a form of words in the section 106 that could achieve that. So if it's not our form of words, what form of words? And it was, as Mr. Johnson explained, we give you the tools to apply such discount as you think is appropriate. It's simply not good enough for the council to say this isn't adequate without saying what would be. It's not reasonable to take that position.
Would it be useful to hear your explanation, and the council can come back on that?
So the 106 is drafted, it's onto its configuration, so it's still in draft form, and it's always been told next on it, so signatory on that, it binds the application land as you expect, or parties that have an interest in taking. I think we'll start at the blue pencil course, because that's pertinent to what Mr. Danner was referring to, which is a so excuse me 9.3 in the draft.
I don't have it printed.
I have. Do you want to?
It might be useful if it.
I've got it online. I've got it.
I've got it.
It's the same one that was
electronically.
issued.
Yeah.
Is it the track change one or the entry?
No, the clean copy.
9.3.
9.3 on page 9. The start of that's very standard. Well, the whole of it's a standard, or well, it's very standard now, in pencil clause, saying that if any part of the agreement, part of the undertaking rather, is deemed to not meet regulation 122, and I've spelled out what regulation 122 says, depending on whether that's going to stay in force or not. On that, then you can disregard, you can state it's disregarded. It links, madam, with the definition of discount, which is on page 3. So 9.3 sets the basis that you, as when determining the appeal, can say whether or not any part of the agreement is right in regulation 122, etc. Definition of discount adds to that, and starts off with the premise, which is 20% discount from market is affordable. But in B, on that, you'll see that's enhanced, giving you, madam, the power to say, well, if I don't think 20%, is enough. Depending on what the council could definitely make 20% enough, I can impose a greater percentage. And to round that off, squares, circle, which is whatever you want, the way that self-build works in this is it's a fairly standard mechanism. Paragraph 1.5 on page 11, the schedule. I will get back to explaining, but this just sort of links to that discount point. You'll see there in the italicized text at the bottom of page 11 that there's some square brackets on it, and the square brackets obviously the deed dated. It's not dated yet, but also the consideration of, and that goes back to the preamble to that in paragraph 1.5, which referring to the defined discount, essentially saying it is 20% or whatever figure you put in. So it all links in to that. So that deals with the discount, level of discount and affordability side of it. I can take you through how the obligation works if you wish. There's two parts to the agreement, sorry, to the undertaking. First is the self-build, second is the social rent. Self-build, 6 proposed plots, units. We follow a very common self-build format in the undertaking, apart from the discount, which is unique for this one. On this, and particularly as I've discovered, it's 20% or any greater figure that you may think is required to make it affordable. It requires, as normal, submission and approval of the scheme, the self-built and custom plot scheme, which sets out the location, the boundaries of each plot, marketing strategy for them, design code for the plots, and development confidence to it. So those credits format there. Services must be provided to each plot before they're sold, again, normal. And unless the council agree in writing, otherwise, the plots cannot be sold other than self-built. So it gives some flexibility in there, but it's flexibility with council approval only. Marketing of the plot for 12 months to qualifying persons. Qualifying persons are defined as those who meet the council's requirements to be entered on their self-built register. Do you want me to refer to the relevant paragraphs? Is that easy?
I'm just looking for the definitions.
So the marketing period is defined as 12 months.
Yes.
Qualifying persons are defined as well. And then that's on page 5. And they have to be marketed at a discount, defined discount, whatever that may be, to open market value, and that's to be determined by the independent RICS surveyor. The definition of value is at page 7. And in addition, to ensure that the marketing is being carried out as it's meant to be carried out, the council have to be told of what's going on every 3 months. So that there's a reporting requirement of every 3 months in there. And then if there is a prospective purchaser within that 12 months, there's a reasonable endeavours clause obligation to enter into that contract. Not all reasonable endeavours, because that would mean more. We have to see, in essence, so reasonable endeavours on it, which is the most reasonable on there. After the 12 months marketing period, if there's been no sale at the discount, then it can go to open market value for the plot. But the owner then has to provide evidence of that value to the council. And this is in clause 1.8 on page 12 of the undertaking. They have to provide evidence of what the sale was and the discount. And the discount will then be paid to the council, and it's stated, it's in that so you can't force the council, but it's stated to be used for affordable housing purposes within the area, in this area of Waverley.
So equivalent of the discount.
Yeah. So post 12 months, no sale, it can go on the open market. If it's sold on the open market, then whatever that discount would be, going back to the point we made earlier about it's 20% or whatever figure you want to be it right on it will be paid to the council, and that's 1.82. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just trying to point out maybe this is kind of purchasing that, which is an appeal decision you've got. So
Yes, that was paragraph 81, Madam of the Oxford decision, which that was 10% sale price provided to the council, so we're more, but the principle of that approach was endorsed by your colleague in that case.
So in essence, if they're sold within the marketing period, it's probably there's restrictions. So it just retains that discount going forward. If it's post-marketing period, it hasn't been sold, the discount goes to the council, but they'll open market, but clearly that discount is then within the council's coffers to use for affordable housing within the administrative area. Moving on, the second part, that should be easier in sense, is the social rent housing, which is part 2, starting at page 13 of the undertaking. Again, it's something that we've come across many times before. There's 8 units here proposed. The scheme, which will set out size, location, etc., will have to be submitted with the reserve matters and approved commences. Nothing new there. And there's a requirement that they can only use for social rented dwellings. There's 2 exceptions to that. One is the mortgagee exclusion clause, which you'll find at clause 4.4. And the second is a protected tenant clause. And protected tenant is defined on page 5 as anybody who's exercising their right to acquire. Essentially, it's that, but they have to have that right to acquire to be able to exercise it. So if they've got that, we need to legislate within the undertaking that if they have exercised that to acquire, then it can't properly be restricted to social rent. But other than those 2, so mortgagee and possession clause, normal 3-month clause, which we've seen many times before, and protected tenant clause, again, nothing unusual with that. They're the only 2 exceptions. Other than that, there's no cascade on this. It's just purely it's social rent, and social rent is defined at one page number 3.
7.
Thank you, page number 7. Up there. So it's defined again, not something you've seen before as with reference on national rent measure on it. So it's not 40%, which is 80%. It's social rent on it. So they're to be occupied in accordance with the nominations agreement with the council. And again, nothing unusual there. The social housing, on one point that was raised by the council on this, the social housing is to be provided with any access to roads, etc., and services on that, which is a standard, not just a standard requirement throughout the country on these. And then as far as timing goes, they're completing the residence occupation. Slightly weird, we've got no open market, there's not going to trigger for this. So we could think how we do this on it in the sense that we get the applicants to say if they're affordable. So trying to judge between the 2 is difficult. On this, we're saying, well, the last self-built plot can't be sold off until the social rent is provided. So there is a trigger there. What I would say to that is the thing to bear in mind, there is no cascade, so it is social rent. That's it. And it would need a deed of variation with the council to change that. So in the sense, you haven't got that position where there's no trigger when it's held out until a cascade comes in. It doesn't apply here. Apart from the normal boilerplate clauses, and that's how it's almost depending on the date of work. So unless you've got any questions.
No, I think it'd be useful to hear the council's comments on that.
I had one question first, if I may.
Yes.
You mentioned in relation to self-build, custom build plots, that a plot can be sold without the authorisation of the council. I don't see where that.
No, I didn't, no, it's, the council have to be told about the marketing.
Yeah.
And show that, they can't be sold on, the restriction on the type applies if a plot is sold at discount. So if a plot is sold at a discount, there's restriction on the title, and that's in, that's that italicized text I'm referring to in paragraph 1.5 on page 11.
Yeah.
So the council then have to, consent to that sale. So yeah, in other words, you're making sure the discount carries on.
So it's
it's
not
not
the
the
first
overall-
subsequent, it's not the first sale.
No,
Council
but the
consent.
first sale, you have to, it has to be, the council have to be shown, have to be the valuer that will value it. Independent RSC is value and saying this is the market value. And then you work out a discount, whatever that percentage is, obviously works back on it. So the council told that and also told how it's marketed, told who it's to. It has to be, you also got to remember that the person has to be somebody who's capable of being on the register, the self-build.
Yeah, so the council is told at the first stage, and it's only at the second stage in
Yeah.
relation to that paragraph 1.5.
Yeah.
So if it was sold on after,
Subsequently.
the discount would apply to the
Yeah,
second,
so you know-
that the council would be told at that
Yeah,
point.
there's a restriction, one restricts first sale within the marketing period to say that discount. So any sale, and the council will be told of that. So if any sale that goes, that is independent value is coming in to give the figures on that. So if there is if the independent value says, well, actually, it's not sold at a discount, then there is action there that can be taken. Subsequent sales are more difficult on it, so but that's why we have to say there needs to be a restriction on the title on it, which is where that italicized text on page 11, paragraph 1.5.
So the council's position is set out in the officer report and in the statement of case. We don't consider that those self-build, custom built plots meet the definition of affordable housing. The council doesn't consider that they would, in the original application, it was stated that the self-build and custom built plots were proposed as a pioneering, what the applicants considered to be a first. In providing self-build, service plots at an affordable cost. An affordable cost doesn't necessarily make them affordable housing. They have to comply with the definition in the NPPF. And therefore it's an untested approach. And notwithstanding what the appellant states, drew your attention to the ethics case. There was no information. We've tried to find information about whether or not that was successful. On whether or not those plots were actually sold for affordable housing or for the discount. But my affordable housing colleagues haven't been able to find any information about that. And again, I believe from memory that appeal decision was 10, 12 years old now. And I haven't come across a similar approach to self-build, notwithstanding the council does acknowledge that the NPPF definition does say they can be self-built plots as affordable housing. But in relation to that appeal decision, that your attention being drawn to, couldn't find any information regarding as to whether or not that approach was successful, or whether or not the discount in that case, which was more than in this case, is appropriate. Despite that, that's in a different area. It's the original application mentioned that they were going to give opportunities to the people currently registered with WPC. It's not necessarily clear what that referred to, whether or not that was registered on a housing register or registered on a self-build, custom build housing. The UU now is for those to be marketed to the self-build, custom build housing register. But there's no information on that housing register as to whether or not those persons that are on that register are eligible households that would meet the requirement for those units or those plots to be considered as affordable housing. The other point in the original application, the applicant was proposing a 20% discount for 12 months from the grant of planning consent, rather than, there's a slight difference on dates, rather than 12 months from the start of the marketing period and then 12 months. It was originally set out that it would be 12 months from the grant of planning consent, after which the relevant plots would be available for self-builders on the open market value with no further obligation. The appellant's own statement very clearly sets out very high market value of properties within Waverley. I think they comment that Waverley is the 4th most expensive borough to live outside of London. I think they set out that the affordability ratio is 13.42 times greater, making it a very expensive area to live. Waverley is a predominantly rural borough. The site is within Surrey Hills National Landscape as well, which makes it a highly desirable location and therefore a highly expensive location to live. Within the council statement, we provided information from an affordability study that was done in 2021, and whilst it doesn't necessarily relate to self-build plots per se, it's very clear in that we use the national cap for eligible households, which is £80,000, and it is specified there for affordable home ownership. So it would be the same essentially for self-build plots, and that's set out in the Affordable Housing SPD. The Waverley Affordability Housing Study set out that for discounted market sales, you would be looking at a discount of somewhere between 28 to 50%. And that was within the council statement. There, again, no evidence has been submitted to demonstrate that the 45 self-built, custom-built plots with a 20% discount would meet that criteria for the dwellings to be affordable. And I think the other concerns are that, again, there is no obligation to sell at a discounted rate. It's a marketing period for 12 months. If that is unsuccessful, they will revert to open market self-built plots with no further obligations on purchasers. And that in itself would take them out of the definition of affordable housing. A commuted sum is offered, but there is no reason, there's no provision in the NPPF for a commuted sum in lieu of the discounted market sales definition. Commuted set there, again, there is no reason why the affordable housing cannot be provided on site. If it's 100% affordable housing to be secured in perpetuity, it's 100% affordable housing. They're clearly able to provide a certain amount of affordable housing on site. So if they want weight to be given to the additional affordable housing, there is no reason why that also can't be provided on site, or that if it's not sold as affordable or discounted self-built plot, there's no reason why they can not look at an alternative affordable housing product to be provided on the site if that weight is given to that. We also have concerns with the revised review that we've just gone through. Again, it clarifies that the intention is only to market the self-built custom-built plots to those on the self-built custom-built register, and therefore it's less clear how they would meet the affordable housing definition. We have concerns about the, in what a better phrase, the trigger point in terms of the selling. They would allow 5 custom-built plots to be sold before the registered provider is the freeholder and completed supported living. In theory, that could mean that the supported living units would not be built. The owner of the site would be entitled to say, I've sold my 5 plots, I don't wish to provide the supported living units. They are the 30% policy compliant, or what's been taken to be the 30% policy compliant affordable housing. So if there is a way that they potentially wouldn't be provided on the site, that does raised question about whether or not the scheme is policy compliant. And in the notes that we received with the revised UU on the 8th, which was the document with the blue,
Yes.
there was some notes in there that says in relation to the qualifying persons definition that this is intentional as the obligation only applies to self-built plots. In relation to the concern of the trigger point, again, they've stated this is a proposal, so it's clear we have a disagreement of positions, and it is for an applicant to propose what they wish to propose, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be acceptable to the council. And therefore we are concerned that, you know, that trigger point, for given the fact that you have got a small number of plots and there is the fallback position that those plots can be sold for open market value plots, that would raise very serious concerns about the deliverability of those supported units which are the policy compliant or have potential to be policy compliant as the better for housing. The council would also expect, I think probably one of the last points, the council would also expect that although it's an outline, we would still expect that the unilateral one did restrict the sort of use to perhaps 1 and 2 beds. That's what they're proposed in the application. That is how, although the site plan is an indicative plan, that I believe is what they're proposing in terms of meeting the needs. And therefore we would expect that that information would be in the unilateral undertaking, that they would be 1 and 2, because whilst yes, we still have to approve the reserve matters, if they're proposing an alternative, they could say, well, if you wanted it restricted, it should be in the EU. It would be, I think, very difficult. I don't see why there is, if that is what is generally being proposed, there's no reason why that can't be, you know, the unilateral undertaking in terms of 1 and 2 bed units. And I think finally, the plan also said that the phasing is consistent with the application phasing in terms of the paragraph 4.3, which allows the 5 self-built plots to be sold prior to the supported units being delivered or being transferred to the registered provider and then delivered. I'm not overly clear that that is consistent with the phasing that's being proposed. Although they are proposing the self-build, the supported living to be in phase A, in theory, it would allow those 5 self-built plots to be sold, and therefore, if the plot is being sold, there is a reasonable expectation that those owners would want to undertake those works on that plot. And because of the trigger point, the actual the attenuation tank for the surface water drainage is in phase A. It's a very large tank. If you look on the drainage plan, it's quite a large tank that is required, I think, to go into the communal open space. So there's nothing about ensuring that that goes ahead, because that's obviously taking surface water drainage from, I believe, the road throughout the site. There may be some additional points that I'll see.
In terms of the concerns about the UU not restricting to 1 to 2 beds, is there a reason that a scheme to be submitted under the UU wouldn't resolve that?
I think the council prefers to have greater certainty in terms of its affordable housing provision. So it's very clear, set out to all parties, and the site is disposed of to a third party or a registered provider. I think it gives the council greater certainty. Yes, I accept that that would be allowing the council to have permission of the council would be required for that. But I think experience can tell the council, which is why it's included in the affordable housing SPT. I kind of get the page reference number for you. I think it's page 14. Yeah, page 14, paragraph 29. It says the section 1.6 agreement will include requirements relating to definitions, the bed size, tenure mix and location of affordable housing. Now clearly it's an outline with layout, so classification, not, but certainly the bed size and tenure mix and performance. We normally have it on a list where it's like a percentage of the overall.
If perhaps if you can come back on that. I'll start then, hand over to Mr. Johnson. And there are two fundamentally separate issues, and it's really important for them not to be confused together. Issue number one is, in principle, can the custom self-build be made affordable housing? And if not, then proceed no further on this issue. And then secondly, if it can in principle be made affordable housing, what does the section 106 need to say to do that? I'm afraid to say the council fundamentally confuses those two questions. Secondly, madam, it was just said a moment ago, the council's position remains both as per its statement of case and as per how it was put to members. That confused me because the council's position has changed, and I'd like to show you how it's changed. It's changed on the first issue. And could I ask you, madam, please, to take up, I'm assuming you work electronically or hard or both?
Mainly hard, mainly hard copy.
Mainly hard. It might actually be easier just in terms of page numbers. It's the committee transcript. I have got a hard copy, but it's not paginated, so it's actually the cost application.
Yeah.
It's you can do it page turn, but it's not paginated. But I'd just like to show you how the council position has changed, because it rather suggests the council itself doesn't understand the issues if it thinks its position is consistent, because it's not. So it's right at the back of the cost application.
Just trying to find my costs application.
I do quote it in an application, but I think it's always important to look at the actual document itself, so you can be sure that I'm not, it's very different.
Okay, I've got it electronically, so I can
Brilliant.
go to the
Okay.
correct
So
page.
in which case, if we start on the very first page of the transcript, there's a few references, so they are in summarised. But so firstly, at on the first page, page 8 of the PDF, you can see the first highlight. So Russell Brown was the case officer. So he tells the committee, custom and self-builds are market housing. I want to be clear on that. And that's expressed as principle, not that there's something that we need to do to make it affordable housing, but they can't be. That's the first reference. Then we need to go a bit further into page number, scroll there. So now go to page 22 of the PDF.
I haven't got page numbers on mine.
It starts with council spends.
That's right.
On the page.
At the top of the.
Just that you go. It's quite a long way in. Last one.
Okay, I think I have it.
So Councillor Spence asked the question, can you clarify? It's clearly a point of weighing on members. Can you clarify, you're talking about 100% affordable or not? And then Mr. Brown reiterates the description in the MPPF doesn't allow them to be affordable housing. There is no mechanism by which officers could secure them to be 20% off the market price. So those haven't been considered to be affordable housing, just to be clear. A couple of points to note there, Madam. Firstly, plain from that wording used that the position taken by officers and on which this application was determined is whatever the 106 said, this simply cannot be affordable housing. And secondly, note that 20% in principle seems to be an acceptable discount, not 50%. Then the next page, I'll just ask you to note, Madam, silence on in a couple of paragraphs down on whether if it were 100% affordable housing, whether the application would be acceptable. And that silence is perpetuated in the council statement of case. You say a telling silence. Then next page, PDF page 23, the big yellow box. Claire Upton Brown, who is essentially Mr. Brown's boss or line manager, whatever relevant terminology is, and you see there she comes in and you see, you can't have self-build as affordable. Affordable is to meet a housing need for rental, shared ownership. Well, that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the definition. We know, as you've seen the point in the hearing statement, the NPPF says in terms that custom self-build can be affordable. So that's just completely wrong. And then lastly, PDF page 29. And if you follow the highlighted text, it's the, you see PDF page 29 again, it's up to Brad. Reference to affordable housing when it clearly isn't. So just pausing there, Madam, the position taken by the council at the time of determination, which the council is saying to you today, its stance here is consistent with, is that as a matter of principle, no matter what Section 106 says, it cannot be affordable housing. And yet at the same time, you're now being told the council accepts that it can be. Well, there's obviously a fundamental tension in the council's case there, which does suggest, with all due respect, I don't mean to be pejorative, it doesn't understand this issue. Appreciate it may be new territory for this council, which may explain why it doesn't understand it, but it doesn't understand it. Once it's accepted, as fundamentally one must, and let's be very clear, it's a decision that took that approach would be questioned in High Court immediately. So once it's accepted that in principle, customer self-build can be affordable, then plainly the focus moves to the mechanics. There must be a way. We have put forward, in the way that Mr. Johnson has set out, two approaches, essentially, in 106. The way which we think is appropriate, and then power for you to impose something else, for example, a greater discount. So, for example, it said that the council's evidence-based suggested 28 to 50% discount is appropriate. Not a position taken by Mr. Brown, but in the committee. But even if you were to think that's right, you've got tools under Mr. Johnson's drafting to impose them. And really, I do urge you to push the council on this. What is it specifically about the drafting of the 106 that doesn't achieve that which they now accept is achievable in principle? We've been trying to get we don't need to perhaps at this stage, maybe to come back to it on costs, but we've been trying to get that feedback through discussions on the 106. There should be track changes. Accept as possible. What are the specific track changes they want to see in this document to achieve that which they now accept is achievable? And if you refuse to do that, madam, that's unreasonable conduct in the cost sense. We want to make sure that you can make this 100% affordable based upon what you think is necessary to do that. And you really any sort of gamesmanship from the council to deprive us of that opportunity because the council is concerned about what 100% means for the outcome of this appeal. Any gamesmanship, which I must say we suspect is going on, should be rejected by you. I'm going to pass now to Mr. Johnson to deal with the mechanics of that. But before I do, one last thing, sorry, forgive me, on Uttersford. Uttersford is acceptance of the principle of the approach. It's simply misconceived, the council saying we haven't proved that it's still a valid approach. There is a clear authority from one of your colleagues that only is on the council to show that things have changed. Yes, costs have gone up. Costs have gone up for all kinds of development. The key thing about custom and self-build is you cut out one of the middlemen, the developer. There are still VAT and stamp duty discounts, which make a huge difference in terms of affordability, plus the land discount proposed. And not all affordable housing has to be social rent. We provide social rent, obviously you'll hear from Transform in a moment, probably more than we need to. But affordable housing, as defined in the glossary of the framework, is there to cover the needs of those who the market doesn't, his needs aren't met by the market. And there are some people who will be in need of a custom self-built home who can't afford one at full market value. And the discount may not take it to the level of social rent, but the discount will provide for those people's needs. That's what the framework says. And that's the principle endorsed by others. And now pass over to Mr Johnson for the drafting, but I must reiterate, as a matter of procedural fairness, if there are specific things that the council is saying, or indeed that you think should be in the 106 to give you the tools you need to make 100% affordable housing, we need to have the opportunity to provide for that. So anyway, over to Mr Johnson.
We can deal with that last point straight away. And it's the point that was raised about the discount price, affordability itself. That's one point. But the other point that was raised by the council was it's just been marketed as a self-build register, which is accepted. But there's a way through that we can add into this. And as annoying as it is not having completed 106 here, it actually does give us the opportunity to take on board what the council is saying. We haven't had the opportunity to sit with them and go through this, so this is my first opportunity. Definition of qualifying person on page 5, and I'll read it out. Means person or household who meets the council's requirements to be entered upon itself and custom details building register. As I understand the council's point, is that would not mean that person is an eligible person, but it doesn't, the definition is not in there, so it doesn't. Including that definition in there is likely to restrict the amount of people coming forward to it and could end up going through the marketing period without it being sold. That was one of the reasons it wasn't spelled out in that detail. But what we can do from here is to state that the qualifying person is not only one that's on that register, but also one that is nominated by the council. So the council then have the ability to say, well, actually, these people are in need, they're on the self-build register, but we also believe they would meet the affordability criteria on it. So rather than overly restricting it by including the definition of eligible person, we will add in there to qualified person, and I will submit a redraft of this later today on that. So essentially just adding into that definition on page 5 that somebody who's nominated by the council, which we think gets over that point because then they have control over who that person is. The second point, as far as I understand it, was the interrelationship between the bringing forward the social rent and bringing forward the self-build and the trigger. And there's also mention of phasing. I'll deal with the phasing first because that's very easy, because the 106 cannot and does not conflict with the conditions as far as phasing goes. The conditions of the condition they have to be complied with. 106 sets a long stop on that. And as I explained earlier, we don't have any market housing here, so we can't have that normal trigger on there. I would say you don't need a trigger because as far as the applicant's case goes, it's 100% affordable, which comes first. It's down to phasing, that's the conditions that can be applied. So I don't think that's a point that needs to be addressed in any changes to the planning obligations. The other point.
So sorry, in terms of the affordable housing provision, you're saying because you're suggesting it's 100% affordable housing, it doesn't matter what phase they're delivered, the apartments, for instance.
Yeah, I think from a planning obligation point of view, man, that's absolutely correct. You know, how that's dealt with on the ground as far as the conditions goes is separate. You know, phase A has to come forward because of a drainage strategy that's in there, then that phase A has to come forward. The 106 is merely saying this is what you have to provide on there. It doesn't detract from any phasing on there. I really struggle to see how this could be changed to cover that point when we have affordable housing both in self-build and in social housing. You want to trigger in there in it. The final point, and unless somebody kicks me on this, is to do with the number of bedrooms on it. The policy, the SPD policy, is that there needs to be provisions within the 106 that deal with the size of the units. There are. We meet that policy. The provisions are that the council get to say how much they are, and to set them out now for this scheme when the need may change. That's why we normally try to avoid that and say, well, let's look at what the need is at the time. It might be 1 to 2 bedrooms now, it might be 3 bedrooms, it might be 1 bedrooms I don't know if I had a crystal ball. Well, lots of things would be different, but so hence that's it. But the big point, bear in mind here, and the major point is it's within the council's gift as to what size those units are, not to the applicants.
No, but all I would say, madam, is fight through you, the council, to grapple with whether it accepts that the section 106, based upon what Mr. Johnson says, enables, subject to where you draw the line in terms of the various issues, enables this to be 100% affordable housing scheme, and if not specifically, what should it say in order to do that?
I think that's council. Have you got any comments on that? Particularly if the qualifying person definition was to be updated to include that the council has control who's nominated for those plots. How would you? Can you envisage that working? That.
In all honesty, ma'am, I can't see how that is going to work in practice, because that would require a huge amount of information to be submitted to us in terms of their eligibility and why the definition can't be on the basis that it's that person is eligible for affordable housing, rather than needing the council to, in effect, almost say, yes, you can live in that plot, or no, you can't. You can buy that plot, and no, you can't buy that plot. In terms of, I'm not aware of any council in this context that has done that, or is aware of that, or would do that. And you know, you can imagine someone goes to the press saying the council won't let me buy that plot. Well, if you don't meet the criteria, that's what's going to be there. So I don't see why it can't clearly set out who those qualifying people are in terms of eligible households eligible for affordable housing.
In terms of the principle set out, that do the council accept that the principle of affordable housing, a self-build and custom build, is
the council does accept and acknowledge is that the NPPF definition does refer to can be affordable self and custom build.
So how does the council see that being implemented?
In it, I would say there would need to be more information submitted in terms of the appropriateness of the discount in this particular area, and I think the biggest cause of concern is the ability for those to be sold on the open market after 12 months, which would, in the council's view, the council's position, take them out of the definition of affordable housing.
Could I come back on that? Could I ask you to go to the glossary of the NPPF so we can look at the definitions and ground that answer in what the NPPF actually says? Whether I can see open on the very same page. So clearly we see the definitions set out, 5 steps. Page 17. Customer self-build is accepted in principle, can be affordable housing now. Plainly, it's inconceivable you could have social rent customer self-build. That concept simply doesn't work, and ditto really other affordable housing for rent, because the whole point is this owner occupier. So based upon the definition, custom and self-build affordable housing could only be within C or D. I think that seems to be fairly obvious, or very obvious. And in the context then, we're necessarily looking at a discount-based approach of some way, shape or form, as opposed to a rental-based approach. So I do find it quite hard to understand the council's suggestion that sort of the principle of discounted customer self-build, whilst it's applicable nationally, isn't applicable in Waverley Borough for some reason. As I said, if it's not so much a concern about the principle of the discount, but the amount of the discount, you've got tools in 106 to debate what the amount should be, but you've got the ability to set the dial. So I think it would be helpful for the council to kind of, is it the principle of a discount, or is it the amount that they have concerns with?
Do you want to respond to that?
I think it's clearly set out in the council statement. It's the amount of discount as one point, as And the affordable housing definition clearly sets out that it has to be housing for sale or rent for those whose needs are not met by the market. And then complies with all of the parts of the definition for each of the category that is being proposed.
So then, sorry, apologies.
I also find it quite offensive actually that the gentleman mentioned gamesmanship on the council's part. It's clearly not the case. And clearly we have suggested how the concerns that we have with the unilateral undertaking, and the response from the appellant was, this is our proposal. And that's perfectly fine if that's their proposal. If that's their proposal, we will comment on the proposal. We have provided comments on that before the unilateral that we just received, that we commented on at the end of May. There wasn't even any reference to supported housing in that unilateral. We can only comment on what is in the unilateral. I'm not a planning agent. I don't operate as a planning agent for everyone else. Yes, I will collaborate, and I will, if I can make your proposal acceptable, but if they're insistent on having a clause that allows those units to be sold in the open market, and there are other concerns with that unilateral, then in the council's position, that is not within the definition of affordable housing.
So in terms of the 12-month marketing period, is that your main concern in terms of the fact that there's not long enough an opportunity for people that would qualify to?
I think it's not long enough as well, but I think it's also with the backstop, which is the reversion to a market.
So it's the fact it can default to market that you're concerned about,
Yes.
even with the affordable contribution that would be built into the agreement.
Well, the affordable contribution, there is no mention in the affordable definition of a contribution being made in lieu of discounted market sales. There's no evidence in that. A community service very much. I think the policy is in the ANH1 or the affordable housing policy has the community service as a last resort or in exceptional circumstances. AHN, it might be 1 or 3.
So only in exceptional circumstances, but not alternative to on-site should be considered.
Yes.
So the 12 months you're suggesting is not long enough to test that. That wouldn't result in an exceptional circumstance, that 12 months failing to sell.
Not in my view, not in capacity, no.
How long would the council like to see as an alternative period?
Well, without, I would probably say, well, it's still not going to resolve the issue because there is still the backstop. So setting aside the backstop of the reversion to open market units, I would probably say 2 years, 2.5 years, no longer.
We can amend it to 12 months or
24
up to 24, 12 or 24 as you consider necessary to make development acceptable. So that deals with the amount, and then it just becomes the principle of the backstop. As to that, Madam, I don't need to read it out because you've already been referred to it. Paragraph 81 of the Uttersford decision deals expressly with the principle of the backstop. And if one looks at the definition, D, housing provided for sale provides a route to ownership for those who cannot achieve home ownership through the market. Well, this would do that both through the opportunity to acquire a discounted custom self-build home, and in the backstop scenario, the contribution provided would help those who couldn't achieve home ownership through the market through a different means. It would be, just to be clear, it would be on-site affordable, not off-site, because if the custom self-build would fall within the definition of affordable, albeit with the backstop, it's on-site affordable. So the on-site off-site thing is, with respect to red herring, it's affordable, but with a backstop. And it's not unusual. don't think we are dragged in a rabbit hole, but the mortgage in possession clauses for RP affordable housing in other schemes. I've got a number of cases coming up where that's involved. So, or because registered providers themselves have to acquire finance. You might have come across these kinds of clauses already yourself, Madam. RPs often have to get finance themselves, and the standard 106, a number of authorities around the country provides that in the very unlikely event of the RP defaulting and the bank therefore obviously having to claim the asset, there's a period of grace in which they have to find another RP, and then ultimately the bank can acquire the property. And that's largely hypothetical but necessary in order for the mortgagee to get the finance from the bank. So this is not alien. Got a secretary, my next appeal, the Secretary of State call in Three Rivers specifically dealing with mortgage in possession clauses. So this is not unusual to have a backstop. And the level of customer self-build need as provided for in our evidence is such that it's highly unlikely it's simply there as a backstop to avoid a white elephant in a hypothetical scenario, but it would still be providing for affordable housing in that scenario. And nothing about the rationale of Karen Baker, at paragraph 81 of Haslemere, that still doesn't apply. That part of her decision is not based upon costing. So the point taken that, oh, well, costs have gone up, etc., and therefore things may be different. That 81 is not about costs. And how else does one achieve customer self-build affordable housing, which is now agreed is achievable? Didn't you understand that?
Not really. The only point being, I will add into the ability to choose discount. I'll feed it in somewhere in there. The same point about saying the marketing period could look 24 months, whatever period or anything in between that you think is necessary. Which point being, of course, is the plots do need to be sold eventually. It's pointless having them just sitting there. And the discount reach itself is not an exception. So I'm just reiterating what was said on that.
Lastly, Madam, because I appreciate you may feel you've got the information you need on this. Can I just say this, that Mr. Lawson, who will address you later on, he genuinely wants to make this 100% affordable housing scheme. He was raised in a council home himself, as I'll explain in due course. If on your reflection, there's anything you think that the Section 106 doesn't do that it needs to do to get it over the line, I do invite you. You have got power to come back to us. The Secretary of State uses that power regularly. Inspectors have that power too. Generally want to make this is not some developer scheme to try and pull a fast one. Genuinely want this to be 100% affordable housing scheme for reasons you'll hear. So I do invite you to let us know if there's anything more that you think we need to do.
So in terms of the council, in terms of the discount, appreciate the level is set at 20% or a different level of discount. Depending on if we find a different level of discount would be more appropriate. Have the council got any comments on what might be an acceptable discount rate?
It's not something that we have had any discussions on in relation to this appeal in terms of putting a figure on it. The affordable housing, the affordability study from 2021 talks about 28 to 50% discount. I think it was the Essex one was at least 30% discount, I think it was. Or
I think it was 20, but
I guess the affordability says 28 to 50%
For 4 beds.
For 4 beds. Bearing in mind these are 4 or 5 bed houses. They are going to be the most expensive plots in the most expensive desirable area, the 4th most area outside of London. I probably would be looking more towards the 50%.
Are you aware if anything's changed in terms of those figures? Because it's 2021, it's 5 years. Would you say they still reasonable in the council's opinion?
I myself have only been with Waverley for a year, So that is very difficult for me to answer. The only thing I can generally say is that obviously house prices and costs have gone up. Since then, this is not an area that house prices tend to plateau or go down. They only go one way as far as I'm aware.
Just on that point, and that means that the advantage of the custom self-build route with various reliefs that I mentioned, stamp duty, VAT, with discount still as well. Those advantages are all the more important, and cutting out the middleman or woman.
Note that there was reliance on the Uttersford in terms of the amount of how much cheaper self-build can
Yes.
be. Is there any evidence that suggests that situation's changed or
I think
terms of-
we looked at that. I don't think the answer is there's no evidence it's changed one way or the other, so that's as good as it gets. It's obvious that build costs have gone up. Not sure it's obvious that house prices necessarily gone up in recent years for various reasons, but build costs have clearly gone up. But that's the absolute cost is not the issue, it's the relative cost. It's this that matters in relation to custom and self-build. So your colleague's observations in Uttersford about the advantages custom and self-build have in terms of relative cost are still applicable. And as I say, I've listed, I mean, just VAT on build costs, still on the square footage, stamp duty, land tax, all of those are they're big ticket items. And £480 £489 per square foot.
So 490. We're very sorry. Apologies. Let's index in category.
Yeah, can I come now? The Surrey Hills National Landscape does have an interest in this issue. It's because of the weight that you will apply to it as against the great weight for conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the national landscape. My take on the discussion that has happened is that what is being put forward to you is an overcomplicated system that I think in practice will fail. And I've seen these sort of things before from my experience. If something has been too complicated at the outset, it has then subsequently been found that you have to change a 106 agreement. Now, my concern, I mean, the Surrey Hills does support genuine, affordable housing in the villages, not necessarily and not the towns, because it's not concerned with the towns, it's the villages, to keep vibrant communities in those villages. But that affordable housing needs to be a relatively small scale and needs to be in perpetuity. Now, I have been confused by the discussion that's been put forward to you. For instance, with the self-build sites, what actually happens and what's the basis of valuation of the subsequent sale of those properties? Because they're shown as being detached houses with decent cottages. Plot values in that area are exceedingly high. It's quite near the railway station, good for commuters. They will command a very high price. So even when you apply a discount, that will not bring it into the scope of those of people qualifying for affordable housing. And then when when the home is built, it will be worth well over £1 million in that area. that, even with any discount, and I don't understand whether there will be a discount and how that works in practice, that does not get even approach the realms of affordable housing. So I would invite you to give weight to the council's concerns over practicality and the way these proposals depart from their policy on affordable housing, and give this benefit, alleged benefit, limited weight.
I think we've probably covered most of that. I mean, really what matters more than value is cost. As I said, there are various costs that are excluded in the way that I've outlined before. So I'm not sure there's anything that Mr. Johnson wants to come
I'll
back.
just refer you back to paragraph 5, part 1 of the schedule on page 11, which sets out the restriction and the fact that Waverley have to agree that the discount is carried forward.
What I would say, as it's the AMB group commenting on custom self-build, I can't find the reference now, but in the Ottersford decision, which I was involved in, there was a lot of evidence that it was mentioned somewhere in the decision, I'm sure, that actually custom and self-build tends to provide a higher design quality, which is some relevance given the national landscape context, because if you're a FTSE 100 volume house builder, every window frame is window frame times 16,000 if you're pursuing homes, for example, and therefore if you wouldn't spend £100 extra on a window because we multiply about 16,000 homes a year, and that becomes a very big number. Whereas if you do it for your own home, a lot of people would pay a little bit more to have a slightly higher or a higher quality finish. And then say there's quite a lot of evidence about in the Ottersford case by the architect, which now retired, unfortunately, otherwise he'd probably be here. He gave evidence there, it's referenced somewhere in the decision. And so that is actually a significant point that ought to be acknowledged by the National Landscape. This is a better kind of housing for the National Landscape.
Well, I'm glad you made that point, because yes, I think we would look for a higher quality design, but that is then drawing it further and further away from being affordable housing. It's just not practical that these self-built plots, custom-built plots, will actually deliver those needing affordable housing. So that's the bottom line.
So, Alex, I'd like the last word, if I may, on that. So that is a key point where we depart, because affordable housing shouldn't simply be social rent, and custom self-built housing shouldn't be the preserve of those who don't need some kind of assistance.
But can I come back on that? Because you could have self-built affordable housing of smaller dwellings, 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings. These are shown in as being detached houses in their own cottages. That will not produce affordable housing for those who need.
Well, if it's your decision, madam, that families aren't allowed to have affordable housing, I'd be very interested to read it.
Yeah, I'll just come back on a couple of points. The Ottersford decision, I think it's paragraph 79 that says they had a 30% discount. In relation to the costs, the council's view is that costs do come up. I wouldn't necessarily agree with Mr. Banner regarding that people will pay extra for their own. I think households are looking to reduce their costs as much as possible, even for their own home that they are building. Certainly in my experience, the price of materials can increase. Clearly, there's always an issue of availability of materials, and therefore perhaps first choice materials is not available. I think that in this particular scenario as well, the documentation submitted with the application and also the site visit will show that there is a very significant site levels difference of, I think it's something like 13 metres, which is huge. It's very significant in terms of cost of development. I think the LVIA talks about split level properties. So we are not dealing with a site that's very flat, that you can basically build a box and, clad it in, materials. There will be some requirements, for the professional input into that. And also, I think perhaps what hasn't been mentioned is that the eligible houses, the eligible households that should be where affordable housing should be directly built, are going to have to live in an existing house while their self-built houses is being constructed as well, which is a significant cost in this particular area as well. And there's just one final point, if I may, going back to the UU, it hadn't been mentioned, but in paragraph 1.2 it also refers to the disposition of the freehold or leasehold interest in the land in the self-built plots. And the fact that the term is leasehold interest could result in a service charge being levied, which will increase the costs as well. I think the council's position is that no one should benefit from the self-builds, custom builds whose income is greater than those eligible households, the eligibility.
So we've heard on the paragraph 10.2 point, we'll take out all these off. Simple.
Last point.
No, thanks.
Just a couple last points there. You will be aware there's an outcome consent. So the precise mix is a matter for within the council's control, including the size of their homes. And all the points that you made about costs in this area, they reinforce the value of the scheme, providing the social benefits you'll hear from Transform in a moment or two, but also custom self-build, which is subsidised. And family, if it were to be a 4-bedroom home for say a mum and dad who had 2 or 3 kids, family homes here are plainly expensive. And if a subsidy means that a family is able to build their own home and live there when they otherwise couldn't, that is doing exactly what the glossary of affordable housing, what's the definition of affordable housing says. It's providing a ladder. Different people are different rungs of the ladder, and that's fine. So we provide for different stages of that ladder through this multifaceted scheme. Seems the opposition would like to pull up that ladder. So you'll hear from Mr. Lawson about his own journey up the ladder and why the scheme is so important for him in due course.
It's 11:30. Did everybody want to have a 10-minute break?
Yeah.
That would be.
Yes.
Are you okay?
Yeah, we're
a little
fine.
bit longer?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, adjourn there till, if we just say 10 minutes, back at 11:40. Okay, we'll reopen the hearing there. Let me see. Oh, we've moved.
I think people have moved. haven't they?
Yeah, that's okay.
Gentlemen, they would like to speak on the custom self-built issue.
Okay.
Good morning, Inspector. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I've never appeared at a hearing before, so I'd like you to read a statement if that's okay. My name is Paul Quantrill. I run a Haslemere-based architectural service specialising in self-build and extensions. Consequently, I have first-hand knowledge of exactly how difficult it is to purchase building plots here in Waverley and how much it costs to build or extend new homes. I've been looking for a plot of land to build a new home for myself in around Haslemere since 2015. I joined the Waverley Self-Build Register in 2016 and I paid the annual subscription, but so far I haven't received a single lead. When I learned that there was an application for 6 affordable self-built plots off Hedgehog Lane, I contacted the owners straight away and registered my interest to purchase. I followed the planning application and wrote a letter of support, and I was heartened to see that the Town Council supported the application and was encouraged to see that more letters of support to those opposing the scheme. That is a very rare event in the borough. On the 17th of December last year, I followed the planning committee online and I saw that the majority of members were in favour of the scheme. They made it clear that they were going to vote against the officer's recommendation, and I felt at last that there was a chance I would finally get a service self-built plot in Haslemere. Then, as you can clearly see on YouTube, both the Chief Planning Officer and the Case Officer went out of their way to convince the planning committee that they should follow the Case Officer's recommendation to refuse the application. I'm not a planner, however, I have been submitting planning applications to Waverley for the past 16 years, and I have picked up some knowledge along the way. I was surprised, therefore, when the Case Officer insisted that the 20% discount being offered and self-built plots couldn't be secured, as he said there is no mechanism. My immediate thought was that surely this could be done via a Section 106 agreement, as the council use these all the time. To compound matters, the Chief Planning Officer went on to maintain that these were large detached properties on large plots. However, this was an outline application and the size of the plots on them had yet to be determined and would be determined at a reserved matter stage. Just like the Case Officer, I did feel that the Chief Planning Officer was attempting to turn the tide and convince members to reject the scheme, and I thought this was unreasonable. The £80,000 household income cap is applied to affordable home ownership in Waverley, but they have not adopted any household income thresholds for affordable self or custom build developments. It's not clear if this household income is actually relevant here. From lived current experience right here in Waverley, I can confirm that self-build homes can be a lot cheaper than those bought from property developers. This is because substantial savings can be made, as self-builders tend to use their own skill and labour. My experience working with clients and self-builds is that they have a hands-on approach and project manage themselves rather than appoint a main contractor. As previously mentioned, there are savings to be made on stamp duty, land tax and SIL. The self-builder can search out and use recyclable materials, which large builders don't do. There's no developer profit margin to take into account in the costs. That way the self-builder gets a much better value home compared to buying on the open market. Self-builders save VAT on materials and labour, which isn't charged by the contractor. Any materials purchased by themselves will include VAT, which is claimed back later on completely. Going back to the Chief Planning Officer's claims that these were large houses and therefore unaffordable, self-built homes don't have to be. For example, national space standards require a 4-bedroom, 2-storey home for 5 people to measure at least 97 square metres gross internal area. I believe self-builders with the benefit of a fully serviced plots and in part using their own labour for basic jobs such as internal redecoration could build this house for circa £3,000 a square metre. That would give you a total build cost of around £291,000. This allows plenty of headroom to buy the land and still come in well under the average costs of a new build home locally, such as the ones for sale on Critchmere Lane and Scotland Park, where they're asking more than £7,000 a square metre. Of course, just is the most important thing, that isn't the most important thing for self-builders, because saving money is a driving force. But just as important is the chance to build a home that is designed around your family's specific needs, your own priorities, your lifestyle and taste. These are the things you will never get from the likes of Persimmon or Barratt's. There are, of course, more general benefits to be had from self-builders. As mentioned previously, they are more likely to produce more varied, innovative designs. They use better quality materials, taking a long-term view rather than seeking short-term developer profits. With a view to energy efficiency, they are more likely to better insulate their homes beyond the requirements of building regulations. They also tend to use solar panels and battery storage systems to reduce energy needs in the future. Self-builders are also likely to seek out the recycled materials as previously mentioned. Waverley has failed to produce sufficient homes in new sites for quite a few years now, particularly affordable ones, and recently that position has worsened. Having seen Haslemere Town Council support the application and knowing that more local people are in favour of the application than those opposing it, and being aware of Waverley's dire shortage of new homes, I do ask the inspector to grant this appeal for the 6 discount self-build plots for people like myself and 8 supported social rent apartments proposed by Transform for the benefit of those living locally in housing.
The council want to come back on that, in terms of the self-build figures and delivery of self-build plots. I know there's agreement between parties in the written evidence that there's a shortfall, but how significant is that shortfall? I've not got any figures, I don't think, in terms of how the council's performing in that respect.
Excuse me, if I can just find my correct piece of paper. I think I have been provided with a figure by my colleague. I'm just trying to find the correct piece of paper.
If I might add something, there was an appeal done from about 4 years ago. That was to do with self-built housing, and an expert put in numbers then when it was shown that the council was about 1,000 houses short, because they had to take into account not just the people on their register, but they had to take into account broader commercial information as well.
No, that's not correct. Here we go. So for, we call it base periods. So the most recent base period information I have
So are you reading out of something that's before the appeal?
no, it's not, but in response to the question.
I just want to establish how significant a shortfall self-build is, because there's no.
Because we were denied the opportunity to address this in writing, so it doesn't seem particularly fair that council's being able to provide new evidence on this when we were.
Okay, I mean, in terms of the level of shortfall.
I would describe it as a shortfall. Not very significant in my opinion, because we do have a policy which is mentioned in the council statement, which is DM 36, which was adopted in 2023, that requires 5% of larger sites to provide self-build, custom-build housing. It's if you are providing developments of 20 or more additional dwellings, you'll be expected to make at least 5% dwellings plots for sale. So that wasn't the case. That policy has been adopted since, I believe, the gentleman referred to the Dunsfold appeal situation. We also do have, again, I appreciate anecdotally, lots of applications for self-build, custom build that are in the description that can be included in the monitoring, primarily for households to be exempt from VAT, because well, that's one of the authorised exemptions currently. Whether or not that situation changes remains to be seen. I believe our register is public, so I don't know whether you want me to give you the figures for the people on the register after the permission. No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Madam, the Dunsfold decision is in the material before you. It's Appendix 7 to the planning statement. I prefer hard copy documents like you, but actually I'm with you on. But it may be easier to ferret it out electronically. It's on the planning statement, a single PDF, and it's at page 211. And this is the last written evidence that you have in terms of the custom self-build need, and noting the council accepts there's a shortfall.
Sorry, what page?
So page 211 of the PDF should be the front cover of the Dunsfold decision. And there's a section on the custom self-build housing starting at page 213 of the PDF, just above paragraph 16.
Is that in an append?
Yeah, it's appendix 7 of the planning statement, not of the statement of case, but the original planning statement written with the application. And the conclusion at 22 is paragraph 22 on page 215, a clear deficiency in the provision of custom and self-build. Council isn't meeting its statutory duty, significant weight. And whatever the precise numbers are, as to which there's no further evidence, it appears to be common ground that headline conclusion, that there's a failure to meet the statutory duty, and deficiency in provision applies. Council may resist the word clear deficiency, not sure any returns on that. It's deficiency in the failure to meet the statutory duty. That's clearly an unmet need. But there's nothing before you from the council that suggests that the detailed analysis set out here doesn't still apply. I don't think there's any point dwelling on, but you've got that text, you can read it in your own time if you'd like to, but that still applies.
I think there was reference in the officer report to it being substantial. It was just looking for clarification on that point, really.
Which would be at peace with the decision.
I think it says that it would be a significant public benefit in terms of the market.
No, it does say it's under the table.
Yeah, so it's
section 12.
Notwithstanding this, there is a substantial and
Yes.
currently unmet need in the borough and therefore regarded as a significant public benefit proposal, which is still the case.
So I think
There's no change.
no, so presumably it can be agreed that the conclusions of Inspector Plenty, the headline conclusions, significant, so clear deficiency, failure to meet statutory duty, significant weight, they still apply, even if the detailed numbers may have moved on one way or the other since.
I think since that time, we have adopted a policy to address. There is a specific policy, DN36, which is mentioned in the council statement.
And notwithstanding that policy, the position is saying.
Would the representatives of Transform like to provide the information on their part?
Hi, I'm Haslemere, I'm the head of housing support for Transform Housing and Support. Just to give you a bit of information about Transform Housing Support, we're a registered provider and a charity, and our purpose is to provide good quality supported housing at a social rent for local Surrey people. Waverley Borough Council's own strategy enabling managers have confirmed that they're backing to support of this housing element of the scheme. And Transform Housing Support are Waverley Borough Council's housing association partners, and have been for many years. We do work quite closely with them. They're committed to Waverley Borough, we're committed to Waverley Borough Councils to provide all 8 units proposed at the Longdean site for supported housing and to be let at social rents. The support comes on the back of a clear need for supported housing locally. I've been in contact with obviously our colleagues in the housing department at Waverley to get some up-to-date figures, and some figures that I received between April 25 and March 26 this year show that around 80 local people faced homelessness and were owed a prevention or relief duty. Of these, 53 households, so that's 66%, had support needs, and most had more than one support need. Yet only 4 of those 53 households, which is only 7.5%, homeless duty was relieved through supported housing. So Transform aim is to empower people to reach their goals and live independent and fulfilling lives. And some of our clients, we've got a client forum that obviously quite involved in our organisation, and they're aware of this application and wanted to let you know how important supported housing is in their words. So it's just a brief quote from one of our clients. We're all Surrey residents, but we all have unique journeys and experiences. For many of us, these have included difficult challenges with our mental health, physical well-being, and the experience of being homeless. Transform supported housing has given us the support and stability we need to rebuild our lives and gain the confidence we need to start to live well and to give back. For some of us, Transform housing and support has literally been a lifesaver. So you ask why here and why Longdean? It's a good location. It's near to excellent public transport, which is really important for some of our clients and local services. Our clients could easily access education, employment or volunteering, and doing so to contribute to the local community. But being honest, we can only provide this accommodation at social rent because of the generous gift of the land at Longdean. A gift of land is rare and really gives us a unique opportunity to do something special, something that we will benefit and serve our communities and some of your most vulnerable members of the community for many years to come. So looking ahead, Waverley Borough Council's housing strategy enabling managers have confirmed the need and their support of the supported social rental element of this scheme. We have ongoing discussions with Homes England, who in principle are supporting the scheme. As an investor partner with Homes England, we will apply for them to fund the proportion of the capital costs via the social and affordable housing programme for 26 to 36. The Longdean site can be easily developed with services already onto it or on the site boundaries, subject to reserved planning matters, our tendering process and the appointing of a building contractor. We would expect to start site early 2027, with the first clients anticipated to move into their new homes in 2028. These clients will be nominated by Waverley Borough Council and supported by a dedicated and experienced housing support team located in the Waverley area. And they will be there, obviously going out to see clients to provide their support. So to conclude, the gift of land and Homes England support gives Transform the chance to do something really special to build well-located, affordable, secure, supported homes for those in the community that really need this housing, and therefore respect the asset inspector to allow this appeal.
The council want to respond to any of the points made there in terms of the support from housing strategy.
I think it's clear in the information that we've been sent to their consultation response was then that they do support the supported living housing. And I think from the officer report, there was never an issue with the supported living aspect of the scheme. And the refusal includes the second reason for refusal because of the absence of the Section 106 legal agreement in relation to that supported living scheme. That position hasn't changed, and therefore I guess the council was quite surprised when in the appellant's statement they proposed to secure the supported housing by condition firstly, and they submitted an options agreement with their original statement, and the council obviously went back as part of their statement saying this wasn't an appropriate mechanism to support it. In relation to the most recent Section 106, the council has said that if they are proposed as supported living, then why is that those provisions are not within the unilateral undertaking that's been submitted in terms of reserving them for that cohort of people rather than just general affordable housing. And again, there is no obligation in the unilateral to sell to Transform housing. It says that it allows the council to approve the RP. And again, the lady talked about land being gifted to them, but there is no provision for that within the unilateral undertaking either. I think the affordable statement, I think that the appeal does reference transfer for £1, but that's not within the unilateral undertaking either. And these were the comments that the council gave back to the council when the provisions for the social rent first appeared in the unilateral undertaking. So originally, the council's expectation was from their reason for refusal that it should be a legal agreement the appellant proposed a condition and an options agreement on the statement, and then when it came back into the being trying to take in following the council statement, we highlighted these comments to the appellant.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Johnson and perhaps also Mr. Rose, Mr. Lawson to explain the reasons for this. Just to be clear, is the council saying it's necessary to make a development acceptable for 106 to specify a particular provider, and what would the development plan policy basis of that be?
Well, if they are providing, if the applicant is providing affordable housing for a particular cohort of people on the basis of the need for that particular cohort of people, as the lady has said, then I would expect it as a planner to be in section 106 to ensure that then that need doesn't persist, because if you're just having the need for section 106 for general affordable housing, which builds there is a need for, then that need may still persist. That's with the scheme.
The particular development plan policy that requires that.
I would have to check in terms of there is a particular policy that I think refers to specialist housing.
Yes, Mr. Rose, madam, would just like to explain, because of there are reasons why it's the arrangements and structures they are.
Yes,
So
can I just come in on that point? When this was originally discussed, including with Waverley Housing, there is a fundamental difficulty with a Section 106 obligation for affordable housing in the way that feeds into the grant provision offered by Homes England. It was originally agreed, and it was agreed by Housing at Waverley, who are very well aware of these issues, that if there was a specific requirement in the Section 106 that obliged those 8 units to be affordable housing, it would make it impossible for any affordable housing operator to gain grant for those houses. The principle that Homes England work on is that they will give grant funding for additional above policy requirement affordable housing. So if a site is required to provide 30% and it provides 50, they will fund the additionality, but they won't fund the base 30. So the deal that was agreed with Housing at Waverley was that the transform element would not be initially included in the Section 106. Now, we recognise that that creates a difficulty, because although there is an option agreement under negotiation between the landowner and Transform, who are in this instance, and very unusually here, an actual, they are party to the application. They're co-applicants. They're not, a housing association which may come along later. Although that option agreement is under discussion between the two parties, it was felt that in this forum, it would be a very difficult argument to make that there was no obligation for the 80 units to be affordable housing. And that is the why it has been put into the Section 106. An earlier draft didn't include it. Now, in doing so, if we then were to limit it to one user or whatever, that could potentially limit or cause difficulty for delivery. And there is another factor here, and Mr. Smith referenced on the Surrey Hills and the weight given to 100% affordable schemes. Quite understand, but there is also a grant element on 100% affordable schemes, because a rather vague quirk of the system is that a scheme which is 100% affordable can attract grant. Now, these are all in flux, but we have had a meeting between the landowners and Transform and Homes England to discuss this in some detail. And the current situation is that funding is attracted by additionality to policy or 100%. There is a problem if there is a legal requirement for a certain amount. And so we are trying to secure delivery here. And just while you've got me, I will make one other point, which is that concern has been raised on the phasing issue here. Phasing condition was requested by Waverley in respect actually of the way the SIL liability works, which is fair enough. but there is a condition which says that can't be changed without Waverley's consent. So in terms of, again, in terms of deliverability, the point is covered.
And again, Madam, though, for the reasons you've heard, we feel that Section 106 gives you all you need. If there's anything that on reflection you think needs to be tweaked to get us over the line on it being 100% affordable, please let us know. We want it to be, not least the reasons you've heard, because then it gets the grant. But generally, let's say Mr. Lawson will also deal with this in a moment, but we generally want it to be. So if you think it's something missing on reflection, please do let us know.
Want me to deal with the
Yes.
the points that were raised. There's two very quick points. Thank you. On this. The one is the definition of registered provider it requires it to be a body capable of affordable housing. It's approved by the council, one point on that. But also one that is one, if one looks at the definition of social rent dwellings, it includes within that, so I'll just find it and I'll repeat it for you. Social rented dwellings, the end of that definition says it may be made available to residents identified needing lower levels of support, which is the form of wording that Transform and I put together on this to identify that. There's no definition of supported social rent dwellings in the MP plan or anywhere on it. So we had some difficulty in saying, well, what does that mean? And the only way to really deal with that was to definition of social rent dwellings and add into that the reality of the situation, which is what's in there.
Council have any comments on that in terms of the social rented dwellings definition, and whether that would resolve their concerns about the supported element?
Well, I think it gets. I think again, it just says may be available to residents identify. So it's the option. So in effect, it could be either or. There is no absolute requirement for them to use as supported units. And I think the definition of the registered providers again only requires them to provide supported living. I was under the impression that there's no national definition, that it's there is a definition of households with support needs, because they are potentially exempt from the maximum rent cap if they have a requirement for needs. There is a greater, I'm sure the ladies may be able to assist, but I've understood from my affordable housing colleagues that there is a way of identifying.
Madam, very quickly on that, we'll delete May. It's the first we've heard that was a problem, so I hate the point of trying to draft an agreement during a hearing, but that's where we are.
I'm not sure that was in an earlier version there.
If that May was to be removed, what would your comments be?
That would appear to reference the level of support that is needed for those future occupiers of those apartments.
Would you like to explain the reasoning?
Yeah, Madam Inspector, I've never actually spoken at a hearing before. But I feel very strongly that I should speak here. If you don't mind, I'll read from a statement that I've written. And I'll give you copies of it after.
Don't accept copies, but
Okay,
quite happy for you to.
If you can take this. Quite honestly, I never thought I'd be sitting in this room today. Over the last 2 years, I worked hard with Transform to put forward a 100% affordable housing scheme. It's aimed specifically at those in greatest housing need and families desperate to build their own home. These are both areas where Waverley have failed to meet their legal obligations, and where over the last 5 years, the council has stood by while the supply has actually worsened. I thought the joint application for 8 supported social rent units to be built by Transform and the serviced affordable plots or local cell builders on land donated by me would be appreciated and grasped by most local people, and it was. The highly thought of Hazel Town Council Planning Committee backed the application. More local residents wrote in support than opposed us. I've been here for 55 years, and I've never seen that before. Active support for housing around here is practically unheard of. Then at the actual committee meeting, the first members to speak, councillors Weldon, Lawton, MacLeod and Munro, all made it clear they intended to go against the planning officer's recommendation and vote in favour of our development. That, unfortunately, was when the case officer and chief planning officer stepped in. They clearly had a different agenda. Some of the arguments the officers used were, and I'm being polite here, more than misleading. I believe the transcript of the committee meeting is in our submission. I won't go into it here, but I would suggest it's a must read. It's better than the Clarkson Farm sort of episode on TV with the planning. As it happened, the committee members were thrown, the officers won the day, and here we are. Of course, for this hearing, the officers have conveniently rescinded the false narrative they used on the night. But that's cold comfort to transform myself. There are lots of NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and bananas build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone in this part of the world. But I don't have much truck with any of that. These homes, if permission is granted, will in fact be very near me, effectively in my backyard. I live at Longby, but I would welcome them with open arms. As Councillor Weldon said at the committee meeting, people have to live somewhere, and where would that be if not here? People often ask me, why am I doing all this? I'm 79 next birthday. Why do I care? Well, I do it because I can. I'm in the fortunate position where I'm able to donate land to the charity. And I care because a decent home is something that's very important to me. If I can't help someone in housing poverty, and we are talking about the neediest people here, and assist some aspiring self-builders like Paul over there to achieve their dream of building a family home, I'm simply impelled to do it. Without boring you too much, I was born in a slum in the northeast of England. No running water, cooking on a coal fire, an outside toilet. Life changed when my family were moved to a council prefab. By the way, it was made from asbestos. Imagine that today. However, it changed my life. It had 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, a kitchen, a separate toilet and bathroom. It was 90 square meters. Good homes don't have to be big. My health improved. I passed my 11+, went to grammar school, and as they say, here we are today. Consequently, I know from lived experience what a good home means. They can be transformative. Going back some way, I secured my first planning consent for 32 homes at Kylacken on the Isle of Skye in 1972. Things were easier back then. The whole application was 15 pages long. There was no social housing requirement, but I still offered to build 2 houses for local people to rent. Well, that's 6% affordable in today's money. Later at Liscard in the 1980s, that's Cornwall, I promoted a scheme that achieved 35% affordable. Fast forward to Grasslands Close, which I hope you visited. Working with Stonewater, the housing charity, we managed to achieve 80%. Now here with this scheme, you could call it my swan song. I want to hit 100% affordability mark. Inspector, you have a chance to right what many consider to be a wrong here. Given the opportunity with the gift of land I'm offering and help from Up Homes England, Transform can provide some much needed supported social rent homes that the council actually want to sign up for themselves. I will ensure the affordable build plots are delivered. Where Waverley Borough Council has failed to perform their statutory housing duty, with your approval, Transform and I will help fill that gap. I respectfully ask that you approve our appeal and help us deliver some much needed affordable homes. Thank you.
I can turn to the council in terms of, if I was to consider the scheme to be 100% affordable, what would the weight council give to that in terms of in the balance?
I think it's a different question because obviously the council's position.
I understand.
So the council's position, I would probably give a significant or substantial weight.
Comments on the amendment. Finish off. One thing the council hasn't addressed at any stage is whether actually, if it were 100% affordable, appreciating it doesn't accept it is, but if it were, would that actually tip the balance such that permission should be granted? That's a question that's studiously not answered in the transcript, as you will see. It's studiously ducked in the statement of case. And it would be quite astonishing, actually, if the council were to oppose a 100% affordable housing scheme. We're going to cover other things in due course, but other aspects of the case. But standing back in the current policy and political climate, very, very brave and striking decision to refuse a 100% affordable housing scheme in the local authority of a 1.28-year supply, 7 minutes walk from the station. Of course, people in need of affordable homes may have less ability to have a car, which is irrespective of the on-site impacts, which we'll discuss, invisible from public vantage points externally. And against the context of the huge and colossal unmet needs and an out-of-date local plan with no new local plan in sight. And I do reinforce that manner by asking if not here, then where? How would you get? We also need not just here and other places, given the extent of shortfall. You will see that the Scotland Park decision says at paragraph 106 that even for that major development, there were no alternatives for the housing, no alternative location outside the A and B. But you only need to wander around Cottleby, wander around Haslemere, which you will have done already, to see the level of other constraints Waverley has, which may obviously be partly why the housing supply is so grim. It hasn't had a 5-year housing supply since some people was adopted ever. We've got heritage, we've got green belt, flood, national landscape, AGLV. Everywhere you go, there's a constraint. And so in a site which the impacts of which, whatever they may be, and Mr. Cook will obviously give his evidence later on that, whatever they may be, they're on site in the context of what is essentially now surrounded by housing, as you will have seen on a number of sides, invisible externally, 7 minutes from the station. It would be quite an extraordinary position and cut completely against what the current government has been doing on planning reform to oppose if it is 100% affordable housing. And it'd be very interesting to test the council's credibility one could give the council's judgment if the council were to address, would it still be saying pushing should be refused at 100% before? Certainly a very much discussed decision if it was refused on that basis.
we will return to the balancing exercise in the other matters section.
Gordon, throw it down.
I think that is all my questions I had set out for the second two main issues as shown on the agenda. I don't know if the appellant would like to add anything on those.
I think if you feel you've got all you need, I should say we have discussed it. In
Yeah.
all the detail.
I'll come to you next.
I was only going to get to the national landscape issue. We might just do a physical reshuffle and bring Mr. Cook.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Manual.
Yeah. Interested parties.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I live in Hedgehog Lane. I'm thinking about the self-build, there'd be 4 or 5 bedroom. Everyone knows the cost of that. The price of that is in the region of £1.5 to £2 million of a 4 to 5 bedroom house in Haslemere. My question is if on the register, the income is 80,000, to get a mortgage, let's say 3-4 times your income, that would be £320,000. So how would they have the ability to afford to build these houses when this is the cost? The price of the houses are £1.5 million. I know that's the price of the house, but even on the cost of the house. So it would have to be very discounted in order to get to that level that someone can afford it on a salary of 80,000. Because I think it's 3 or 4 times that, isn't it, for mortgages? It's just a comment.
Could I respond to that? First of all, these don't have to be 4 or 5 bedroom homes. This is an outline consent, and the size can be determined by the local authority. As far as the costs are concerned, Mr. Quantrell showed that he could build something much more cheaply. He went into some detail on that. I think that's the point here. And as Lord Banner said, it's all relative. It's how much you can achieve, the savings you can make. I'd say another point is relating to what was said earlier about the site being difficult to build on. Now, this is Haslemere. There's almost no flat land in Haslemere. But a lot of this site doesn't require any major earth moving at all, quite honestly. And where there is a slope, you can build a split level house. We never envisaged any major earthworks.
Any more comments on those first two main issues that we've discussed before we move on to national landscape and the landscape character?
Andy, do you want to just come here?
We want to start now before lunch. I've got quite a bit to cover.
Yeah, it may be worth breaking for lunch now, and then we'll come back to that if that's okay.
Only because then you'll hear it all in one go.
Yes, yeah, that would be useful, I think.
One context.
Would everybody be satisfied with 45 minutes? So yeah, okay. So we'll come back in 45 minutes.
That 1:10 past what?
Yes, yes.
Let's